Welcome to another episode in our Partners in Making series.
Have you ever thought of making your own shoes that fit you perfectly? Most people may wish to, but wouldn't actually consider taking it on.
If your grandparents were tailors though, and they taught you how to sew fine clothing from a very young age, the idea of tackling shoemaking isn't so far-fetched.
Meet Rachel. She's an engineer in the SOLIDWORKS product definition team, a talented designer, and a dressmaker.
A couple years ago, we had a magic wheelchair project, and we made a princess outfit and princess castle for Princess Freya. I learned how to draft a pattern from that, and I actually ended up using SOLIDWORKS, and that inspired me to then go on and make another dress. And I made a presentation about how I use SOLIDWORKS to make Freya's dress, and now that dress, while wearing it. That day, I was wearing a pair of heel shoes, so I bought them to match that dress. I wore them all day long at the conference, and by the end of it, I thought my feet were going to fall off.
I was walking to the PD dinner with you, Sal, complaining about it, and you jokingly said, "Why don't you just make your own shoes, Rachel?" So I said, "You know what? I think I will."
This is the story of how one determined soul taught herself how to make shoes.
And how, in a very small way, we helped her on her journey. All shoe designs are slightly different, but they're generally made up of a few key parts: an insole, an outsole, and an upper, which is often reinforced by a toe box and a heel counter. Each part is built around what's called a last. This is meant to mimic the desired shoe shape that encompasses your foot. Of course, everyone's foot is different, so lasts come in many shapes and sizes.
The biggest issue in my shoemaking journey is figuring out the correct size last. This thing on the table is called the Brannock device. This thing will tell you the length of your foot, the length of your arch, and how wide your foot is. And it'll give you numbers and letters to get that all sorted out. At the beginning of my shoemaking journey, I didn't even know what this was. So I said, well, what's my shoe size that I wear right now? And I'll just buy a last in that size, because my shoes fit, right? No, apparently they don't.
After purchasing a last, she practiced making her first set of shoes. This is how she learned that the last was in fact too big.
Well, so you acquired a new last. Still not the perfect Rachel's foot size.
Yes.
But closer.
Yes.
And how did you just kind of, you were like, I need something smaller? Is that basic?
Yep.
Okay.
So from here, so these three were all on the original last. And then I got this one. I made this shoe on it. I really liked this toe shape. I really like this pointed toe. I think it's very classic.
She wanted to buy an even smaller last with the same pointed toe style, but the vendor had stopped selling them.
So she did what any maker would do. She figured out how to make her own last, even though it would require tools that she didn't own. Being a member of the 3D Experience Lab meant she could get the job done.
Rachel used a Peel 3D scanner to scan her existing last. Then she opened it in SOLIDWORKS to scale the length down by a centimeter. She mirrored and split the last in half to create 4 pieces that could be cut out of a thick piece of white oak.
I color-coded them so that the left was one color and the right was one color. So there's a left and right last, and then there's the left and right half of the last.
In the Our Next Make shop, we showed Rachel all the steps it takes to CNC an object. We flattened one side of the slightly cupped 8/4 oak by running it through the planer, and then we cut biscuit slots on each side to help hold the piece down to the CNC bed. We screwed these simple, custom hold downs to secure the stock and then ran the tool paths. The cutting started with a roughing pass that removes the bulk of the material. It creates this stair-step result. Then we ran a finishing pass that reveals the contours of the last. We cut the tabs that held the pieces in place using an oscillating tool and took a moment to inspect the results.
Rachel used contact cement to glue the 2 halves together and then refined things a bit to even out the surfaces. She used a 2-part self-hardening putty to fill in a few areas, including a chunk that broke off on the CNC. Then she sanded everything smooth. Now she could repeat the process she learned on her practice shoes to make her best pair yet.
My process for making the pattern was to cover this entire thing in tape, draw a line down the center, and then also the center back. And then you also need to find the widest points at either side of the ball of the foot and draw a line across. For the style of shoe I'm making, there's other things I need to keep in mind as well. So I have a mark at the back here. So this is how high up at the back of my heel the shoe needs to go. And depending on the size shoe, this height is different. the contour created, so like all of this and then the side up to the back, this is your safe zone and you design around that. I really like having a tiny little point here in the front, which you can see in like this and even like these. Then I will cut the tape in half and as carefully as possible, I will peel it off and stick it on a piece of paper as flat as possible, adding relief cuts where I need to, and trying not to overlap things, because if you overlap it, then the pattern becomes smaller and leather stretches, but fabric does not. So I did the tape pattern and then I had to make a paper pattern. So when making the shoe, this part that is like the part that covers your foot, this is called uppers. You take the uppers and you pull it over the last and then secure it in place. I usually put a nail in the back here so that I know that it's in line with my points up here. You'll have something here, this will be your insole. Pull and pin, meaning hammer and nails, this material here, and you will keep checking it from the front. You'll pull it some more, stretch it some more until everything is taut and nice looking. You don't want anything loose because anything, so like it's making a little wrinkle over here. If I leave it like this, this will be the real shoe. If you make something lumpy, it's going to stay lumpy. So you have to make sure that you're pulling it nice and tight and making sure it stays there after you either sew it or cement it into place. There's other construction things that are important, so you need stiffeners, especially for a heeled shoe. I have a stiffener here and I have a stiffener at the toe, and this is important because when you put on the shoe, this is what keeps it from just folding under like your shirt. And then the toe as well, this will give you some protection if you stub your toe or something. It also holds the shape. The heel itself is made out of wood. For every heel I make, I almost exclusively use my spindle sander because it just makes these nice curves. And then I glued the fabric on. When you put the fabric on the heel, you're really like pushing it and like making sure that it's on the thing and there's no air bubbles or anything. When you're working with leather, especially leather that is extremely stiff like outsole bend, you need to soak it in water before you can do anything. What I did was I cut out the general shape, which took 12 passes with a utility knife. While the leather was still wet, I had to thin it down by yanking it through a leather splitter, and I had to do this multiple times in small chunks so that I wouldn't stretch it, because when leather is wet it stretches really easily. I wanted the part where the ball of the foot goes to be the full thickness of the leather, and then the rest of it needed to become much thinner so that it could go over the arch and down and around the heel, and that it would be flexible enough to do that. Once the back half was thinned down, I wet molded it in place, so again the leather is still wet. I held it to the bottom of the shoe with the heel attached, and then I wrapped it up with a ribbon and I tied it in place really tightly. So the next day, after it had dried overnight, I could take that ribbon off, take the outsole off, and then I could see where it folded up, and any place it doesn't fit, that's where I smooth, that's where I sand until the outsole fits perfectly. And then I could paint it gold. Every single time I make a shoe, it's better than the last. I'm not doing anything different, I'm just doing it better.
Rachel found the value of repetition to hone her skills and build experience. I love how her fearless determination helped produce a beautifully handcrafted set of shoes that will fit her perfectly.
We hope this project inspired you to learn a new skill and make something that's uniquely yours. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on our next make.